when we cross the river, everything south here is my district. And so this is what I think a lot of people refer to as south of the tracks or the south side of Fort Wayne.
Growing up in a law enforcement family, past 6 years old, I never really wanted to be a police officer. I did when I was really little, but I just didn't. I wanted to be the first person in my family to go to college, to get a bachelor's degree. So I first heard about Huntington when I decided I wanted to go to a Christ-centered institution. I think what I fell in love with Huntington the most is that it feels home. When you walk on that campus, whether you haven't been there ever, or whether you haven't been there in a couple days and you were gone for the weekend, or whether you haven't been there in 20 years, you walk back on that campus and it's the memories, it's the people, it just feels like home. I was offered a job with the Fort Wayne Tin Caps in minor league baseball, which is probably the coolest job you could possibly think of. I worked the entire 2013 season with the Fort Wayne Tin Caps full-time, absolutely loved it. The hours were just too much. I wanted to maybe go into more of the broadcasting side because that was what my degree from Huntington was in. Applied, my very first application was to NBC 33 here in Fort Wayne, and it was a quick interview and I got the job as an advertising executive.
I met Keirsh at a youth outing. From day one, I loved him because we teach marriage classes, and I knew that he really was a family-style man or wanted to be one.
My parents had continued to say, just, we love Keirsh, like, why don't you date Keirsh? And I was like, my parents I'm like 17 and they're pushing me to date this guy, I don't understand. They had never pushed me to date anyone, ever.
While I was working for NBC 33 in 2015, the Michael Brown shooting happened in Ferguson, Missouri. I remember sitting in my living room watching the unrest in Ferguson, and at 25 years old, it hit me for the very first time that not everyone thinks police officers are the good guys. I remember sitting there going, I have to fix it. I've got to go do this. I've got to go become a police officer and be the solution and fix it.
We were about 3 months from getting married. I remember he was starting to just act different. He was starting to be almost like irritable. And one night we wanted to go on a date night and we went to Applebee's and we sat down and he said, I think I want to be a police officer.
I think it takes a lot of loyalty to be a few months from your wedding and then have your fiance tell you, I want to drop this comfortable job and I want to go be a police officer. But she was the most supportive person I could have possibly had. I mean, she said, okay, let's get this done. How can we get this done? This was my season. This was what I wanted to do. I had no idea what I was doing. Make no mistake, I had no idea how I was going to fix race relations in law enforcement. But I knew, just like any calling, that I had to do it. My first step was to just learn. I learned about the civil rights movement. I'm still learning about the civil rights movement.
When Keirsh came, it was just refreshing to have an officer in the building that kids could get to know, they could spend time with and talk to just like a regular human being, and see that police officers are just normal people. One of the things we think is very important is for our young men to value law enforcement. And so in our situation, a lot of times our young men are more fearful of law enforcement than they do value it. And so with Keirsh coming into our school building, he's been able to help us to really put flesh to what we've been trying to teach them theoretically.
Keirsh is a little different. He goes beyond. He's a believer in community-oriented policing. He stops and listens to what people have to say. A neighborhood resident called in saying that children were playing basketball in the street. Any normal person would say, well, isn't that what children are supposed to do? Yes, they're blocking traffic. Yes, it can be a busy road at times, but ultimately that's what we want our children to do. We want them to be able to build bonds together. And instead of Keirsh going up and scolding these children, get out of the street, he actually went out and played basketball with them.
Every day in my squad car is a basketball and my baseball glove and a baseball. If I see kids throwing the ball around, I'll get my mitt out and we'll play some catch.
I met Keirsh Cochran 2.5 years ago. We hiked for 72 hours, probably 30-some miles in the hills of Kentucky. Keirsh really stands out in that trip. He was one of the guys that helped other guys when they couldn't carry their pack. He just has that type of an attitude about him. It was great to just see how he had just the right things to say at the right time, the right questions to ask. He just has a natural ability to draw out of other people goodness, and I think that that's something special because not all men feel like they connect well with other guys.
Keirsh and I go back about 8 or 9 years. He lives by leave people better than you found them. He's going to find every way to help improve that person's life, even if that means taking them to jail, even if that means other drastic sources. He's thinking about that end result. How is this person's life going to be better after they experience an interaction with me?
Keirsh is a man after God's own heart. He wants to know God. He wants to have a relationship with Him. He's a man who cares about people, sharing God's love with others. He's one who is a man of character. He's the same man out on the street serving in the police force as he is on the Sunday morning here in his plain clothes.
I'm married to Christie, who's incredible. She is one of the most graceful humans that I've ever met. I have a daughter, she's 6 months. She's my first child. I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't know how to be a parent, but she's hands down the cutest baby I've ever seen in my life. I recognize maybe the chaos, the internal turmoil that a lot of students have. You feel like you have to decide what you're going to do for the rest of your life right now. And that's just not the case. That's a lie from the enemy. Enjoy where you're at now. Enjoy the passions that God has put in you now, because that's probably sharpening you or training you for what He has for you down the road. Find your passion, and a career is somewhere along the way.